India has a true friend in White House.
Is there a balancing of ties that we're seeing when it comes to Trump?
I think you will see a lot more pressure on India, maybe not public, but you will see behind the scenes.
How would they really navigate the space of Make in America versus Make in India?
India will probably overall make the argument that there is less kind of clashing than you'd think. But the reality is that there is going to be this dimension where there will be certain cases where President Trump will ask, why are you investing in India? Why are you creating jobs there rather than the United States?
But is he going to give India a carve out when it comes to Russia?
The question for Trump himself won't necessarily be, are there sanctions on Russia or not? His question is going to be, India, why are you buying so much oil from Russia? You should be buying it from the U.S.
A new administration in the United States of America, and the first engagement in terms of multilateral cooperation and talks was the Quad Foreign Ministers meeting. I'm being joined by Tanvi Madan, Senior Fellow at Brookings, to discuss India-U.S. relations, but more importantly, what does Trump 2.0 mean, not just for India, but for the world. Tanvi, thank you so much for joining us here on the India Today Network. Let's just begin with Trump 2.0, but the fact that is there a balancing of ties that we're seeing when it comes to Trump, his outreach to China on the one hand, and yet having the Quad Foreign Ministers meeting as the first multilateral meeting of the Trump administration?
I think you are seeing more both dimensions of this, which is outreach to China, as we did, mind you, in the first Trump administration. If you remember, there was a Mar-a-Lago summit in the spring of 2017. And then you're seeing, as you said, the Quad meeting and then bilaterals with each of the Quad foreign ministers. But I think you're seeing that in other ways too, kind of different, perhaps competing instincts play out with implications for India. So for instance, on the one hand, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar getting pride of place in the inauguration ceremony, the first bilateral for Secretary Rubio. But on the other hand, also Trump himself calling India the tariff king in the past, some of the executive orders on trade and on immigration that will have implications, adverse implications potentially for India, depending on what the Trump administration does. And I think what you see, or for that matter, in Secretary of State Rubio's readout of the meeting with External Affairs Minister Jaishankar, you saw not just talk of defense, security, technology, and energy cooperation, but also a warning in there, or caution in there, that the U.S. expects India to cooperate on what they call irregular migration from India. So I think what this reflects is that there are competing instincts, sometimes in the president himself, but definitely in his administration, with different people with different instincts on everything from geopolitics to the kind of globalization that they want to see. And I think that the end result of that debate, whether on trade, whether on immigration, whether on industrial policy or China or Russia or Iran, and what to do about those countries, those will have implications for India. And to me, that is what India will have to track, even as it manages the bilateral dimensions of the relationship.
Okay, so Tanvi, we'll zoom out in just a bit and discuss Russia, the region, the world, but zooming into the bilateral. You spoke about the first bilateral between Marco Rubio and Dr. Jaishankar, and while there was a lot of conversation about taking economic ties forward, trade, tariffs certainly is going to be a major part of the conversation. The irregular or the undocumented Indians, the fact that this time around America is raising concerns with India, and these are major concerns after policy decisions and announcements that have already been made, executive orders that have already been signed. What is the implication for Indians there? We're being told about 18 to 20,000 of them are set to be deported, repatriated to India.
So there are two issues which did actually come up in the Trump 1.0 administration and even in Biden, but I think the scale has increased. One is these unauthorized, irregular, use whatever term you prefer, immigration from or migration from India. And second is India is a source of precursor chemicals for the production of fentanyl. Let me talk first, since you asked about that. I think there are different dimensions to this. There is the high-skilled immigration dimension of immigration, and that you've seen the debate play out very publicly, sometimes descending into racist rhetoric. But the president himself, just yesterday or maybe the day before, I can't recall, as well as you've seen others like Elon Musk talk about the reasons that the H-1B program in particular is important. The president has said we want competent people and qualified people to come. On the other hand, you have many in his, or number of people in his base, as well as his deputy chief of staff for policy, Stephen Miller. So think of this as the Musk-Miller debate, who have expressed caution, if not more, about these programs and want to, if not shut them down, at least reduce the numbers. So I think that's one dimension, the high-skilled immigration. And I think the argument you seem to be seeing India making is we will actually work with you on the other dimensions of this immigration issue that you brought out, but we would like to see continued labor market access for qualified Indians through legal routes. The other two issues are both around kind of different elements. One is the number of undocumented Indian immigrants, which, there are some people the visa overstayers has been a long-standing issue. But in the last few years, you've also seen an uptick, as your audience probably knows. You've seen reporting, including India Today has reported about this, of people coming in through what, is called the donkey routes, and through the southern and northern borders. This is something that the Trump administration prioritized in the first time. India has been working with the Biden administration to take back some of those that the administration had wanted deported. But I think you will see a lot more pressure on India. Maybe not public, but you will see behind the scenes that sometimes, for instance, they will link other issues that India needs progress on to the number of these deportation flights that they want India to accept. Now, I think what you've seen Delhi do is preemptively, according to reports, already offer to work with the administration on this.
Yes.
And this is not unexpected. And then I think the final issue, just very briefly, that has come up thanks to these executive orders is the question of birthright citizenship. And I think that will affect the numbers of Indians, perhaps, who are on H-1Bs or waiting for their green cards, whose children are born here, or, for example, for that matter, Indian citizens who are students or on other work visas, and their children who are born in 30 days, what is their status?
Well, Tanvi, just sticking to the very same topic, how much do you think is there going to be a pushback on the birthright citizenship, the American dream being shattered, these people who go there and put in everything, their life stakes, so to say, after the children are born in America? How much do you think there'd be a pushback, and could this go to the courts?
I think it will definitely go to the courts. There have already, I think, been some cases filed. There will be various organizations who will do so. So to put it briefly, this will be challenged. It is already being challenged, and I think we'll wait and see where it goes. The question in the meantime, though, is this does create uncertainty for a number of people in the meantime. And while this has been, what so far that they have said is this will be, for any child born from 30 days from now, there will be questions that will be raised about that. You might even see an adjustment as there's recognition of the impact for the U.S. of qualified individuals not choosing to come to here and coming here, but going to other countries as well. So you might see this actually spill over into some of that debate about high-skilled immigration. But this is something parts of the Trump base care about. We'll see how far this goes. But yes, this will be challenged and already has.
Okay. You also mentioned fentanyl. So what are the concerns over there, and how is India going to navigate that space?
So you saw this even come up when President Trump visited India in 2020. As your audience knows, India has talked about itself as the pharmacy of the world. Now, that is the good side, right? That India is one of the largest, if not the largest producer of vaccines, of affordable pharmaceuticals for not just India, but for export. The other dimension of this is that it also happens to be the source of some of these fentanyl itself, but actually particularly these precursor chemicals. And there has been a pretty widespread fentanyl problem, or at least which is quite fatal for those who take it in the U.S. And this is something that earlier it was the methamphetamine problem. Even some of those precursor chemicals came. Now, the question China's as a source of these chemicals has come up, but it turns out that India is actually high up on that list. Now, this is not a question of will. Sometimes it's about capacity. Sometimes it's a question that has not come to the attention. It's not necessarily been prioritized. But I do think a Trump administration that will be looking at the list, just as they did last time. If you go back and look at the statement from the Trump visit in 2020, you will see mention there of India and India working with the U.S. To address some of these concerns, and I think you will come back. And so, given that Trump has already said that he will be linking tariffs to China's cooperation on fentanyl, I think I would not be surprised if you also saw India preemptively offering cooperation on addressing some of these concerns about these precursor chemicals going. So I think like
Right.
immigration will be an issue that will come up, but I think India will probably preemptively also try to address some of those concerns.
Right. Tanvi, when the election results came, a lot of people in India were quite happy with the results and said that, Trump is going to be good for India. Trump and Modi get along. It's good news. But in terms of the decisions that have been made, how difficult could things really get? How challenging could things get with Trump at the helm of affairs? I ask you this is because he's now said that he's going to have additional sanctions against Russia. He wants a negotiated peace between Russia and Ukraine. But is he going to give India a carve out when it comes to Russia, as the Biden administration did? Or is he going to be very tough? And then what would India's position really be in continuing to buy oil or engage on defense matters with Russia, or even for that matter, Iran, where his position is very clear?
With any president, and particularly Trump, this should not be surprising. It was actually quite predictable that there would be some issues which would be, and some of his stances that would benefit India. For example, his administration, parts of it do have a more assertive view of China that benefits India because India is seen as important in that regard. Some in India also like the fact that he will say, his administration said, we shouldn't be going around telling countries what to do politically or culturally. That people will like. Others had hoped, for instance, that he will take a different view on Russia. And so, yes, there will be parts which will benefit. But you've also seen that there have always been these issues where there will be adverse implications. And then the question is, how does India manage them? So the reason you see the government kind of take you see both elements, an element of confidence that they managed the Trump administration the first time around, but also some caution about mitigating the fallout, sometimes not of something bilaterally, but as you mentioned, these issue of what to do about sanctions on Russia. And I'll just say something about that. But I think so you're going to see this both throughout the Trump administration. There'll be things that will be positive for India, and sometimes these will not have anything to do directly with India. India will benefit from them. And then India will try to take advantage of certain issues. But there will be other areas where even if they're not targeted at India, some of these, there will be negative costs, including in terms of thinking about what the administration decides about its commitment and the amount of time it wants to spend on the Indo-Pacific and with allies and partners there. On Russia, just very quickly, I think Russia and Iran are both issues where there is a debate within the Trump administration, and we'll have to see how it plays out. For instance, one of the questions we're all waiting to see is how whether, how, when the administration approaches the Russia-Ukraine war and bringing it to an end, as President Trump has said, even he pointed out that it is more complicated than expected for him. He had said he was going to do this on day one, and that he will not want to see America come out looking weak. And so the question for him will be, how do you do this? And for his people, also you have to get Russia to agree and Ukraine to agree. After all, there are two countries involved. So I think some of that. On the sanctions front, even if so far what they'll do is the increased sanction is to also create some leverage on Russia. But down the line, the question for Trump himself won't necessarily be, are there sanctions on Russia or not? His question is going to be, India, why are you buying so much oil from Russia? You should be buying it from the U.S. The U.S. is already a source for Indian imports of LNG and oil, and I think you'll see Trump wanting to see a lot more of that from India, depending on the availability of these, of course. But that is the question he will have. I think he'll have less of a question on sanctions, but I don't see them being lifted in the immediate future. Down the line, I think, depending on what happens with the Russia-Ukraine war. On Iran, very quickly, the question, there is, again, a debate in the administration. There are some Iran hawks who want to take this moment of weakness for Iran, given its setbacks it's faced, to back Israel or for the American or Israeli use of force. Having said that, it's worth noting that President Trump himself resisted these calls for the use of military or action against Iran in his first administration, and he's not a big believer in U.S. Starting another war and military action potentially against Iran potentially has the potential to do that. So he might be actually more cautious. Some are speculating here, is he the president who might actually do a deal with Tehran if Tehran actually comes with the right sort of negotiating attitude?
That's an interesting point, Tanvi. But also, I might sound like a skeptic, but these are very important questions that we're discussing today. The other one being, and my last question to you, I know you have to leave in some time from now. My last question to you is that, again, another contentious and challenging issue for India would be, how would they really navigate the space of Make in America versus Make in India? Because Trump has been very clear in his policies that you need to come to America, manufacture in America, that people are going to produce and manufacture there rather than taking their products out of America. And in that, how will they really navigate, how will India navigate that space with the United States of America, given that they have been asking and wooing investors to come into India to make in India?
So I'll just say, one thing on skepticism, I don't think it's a question of skepticism or not. I think, it is, there was some, I would say, irrational exuberance, to use an old term, earlier. I don't think that was the case in government. I think for the Indian government, likelihood is they were looking at this as, we have to deal with whichever president gets elected in the United States. It is a important, if not the most important, if you look across the board at different domains, country for India, or consequential country in some ways for India, along with perhaps China and Russia and Europe. And so the question is, how do you deal with, what are the positives, what are the negatives, and how does India deal with it? In the case of this kind of, how do the two industrial policies interact? I think you'll see a mix. I think they will wait and watch to see how this, Make in America approach rolls out. You have seen President Trump, for example, on, say, shipbuilding, say, actually, we might even have to do that in allies because we don't have the capacity. Now, there'll be some political blowback. Let's see if he reverses that stance. But so far, he's shown some talk of, when talking about supply chains, making sure they're in allied or partner countries or trusted countries. Having said that, I think what you will see, or you should see, the Indian government make the case, or we'll see if they do. You have Indian companies who are producing here, who are manufacturing here. One thing to see, will Prime Minister Modi on his next visit actually go to the facility of an Indian company creating manufacturing jobs here, which Indian prime ministers haven't tended to do, which has always surprised me, to make the case that actually Indian companies are also creating jobs here. And the second thing I wonder if you will see down the line is usually when Prime Minister Modi has come here, he's often made speeches that speak to an Indian audience rather than an American audience. But to see him make the case actually for why not just that America should pay more attention to India, but why India is important for America as a partner. So I think you might find different ways, but I think India will probably overall make the argument that there is less. These ideas are less kind of clashing than you'd think. But the reality is that there is going to be this dimension where there will be certain cases where President Trump will ask, why are you investing in India? Why are you creating jobs there rather than the United States? The answer for India is not something necessarily to do with the Trump administration. It is perhaps in this upcoming budget or in separate from the budget to make the case through easing the business environment further, through perhaps easing import tariffs, through various other reforms that still remain, to make the case for not just American companies, but others as well around the world, that India is the place to do business for its own sake, not just because another government is telling them to do so.
Right. Brilliant perspective, Tanvi Madan. Thank you so much for joining us and speaking to us on what the relationship really means and what Trump 2.0 could look like for India, challenges as also opportunities ahead. Thank you.